The Gospel of Matthew in the 25th chapter. Henry and Henrietta got married late in life. She was rather wealthy and he was not. So she brought all the money into the marriage. And when they get married, they moved into a brand new house that they had bought with Henrietta's money. And when they moved in, she reminded him, Henry, if it wasn't for my money, this house wouldn't be here. Sometime that week, a furniture company came and delivered a house full of brand new furniture bought with her money. And she reminded him, Henry, if it wasn't for my money, this furniture wouldn't be here. Sometime later, the department store came, delivered a big screen plasma TV bought with her money. And she reminded him, Henry, if it wasn't for my money, that TV would not be here. Henry had enough. Henry said, Henrietta, I hate to tell you this, but if it wasn't for your money, I wouldn't be here. I hope that's not how your marriage is. Last week I began a 5-week series that I'm entitling You and God's Money, because it is God's money in your pocket. And for 5 weeks we're dealing with the subject of what does God say about His money in your pocket. Money is a carnal subject. There is nothing spiritual at all about money. But your attitude toward money and how you handle money certainly is an indicator of your spirituality. God uses carnal things to test a man's spirituality, and there's no greater test than the test of money. So we're spending 5 weeks on the subject of money, and particularly the giving of money. That's the aspect I'm really interested in. I said this last week, and I'll repeat it. I believe that all of God's children should be givers. I believe that. I believe that Christian giving begins with the tithe. And so we preached on that last week. By the way, if you were not here last week, we gave everybody that came in a little booklet that I wrote on tithing, lawful or legalistic, burden or blessing. We passed that out last week. If you did not get a copy of that, they're in the bookstore. Go to the bookstore after the service and they'll give you a copy that is free. I do want to say this, take only one just for yourself, not for your friends and family, because we're selling them to everybody that's not here, all right? And so, but if you didn't get a copy, then go by after the service in the bookstore, and they have them there, and they'll be glad to give you one there. I say this just to the membership of Victory Baptist Church, this part right here, because I want to be careful. We have, every week we have folks that walk in for the first time and you don't know what we believe and what we're about and what have you, and I understand that. And so if you're visiting with us this morning, I want to say that you're under no obligation or expectation to give a dime to Victory Baptist Church. It is the responsibility of me and those who are the members here to finance anything that goes on here. And I believe that every member of Victory Baptist Church ought to at least be a tither. I don't care if you made $1 this week or made $1,000 this week. Doesn't matter. You ought to tithe 10% off of that. And I'm sure that like every church, Brother Keith, that we have members that come in and they soak in all of the blessings, but they never do take any of the responsibility. And you ought not be a taker, you ought to be a giver. Somebody give me an amen right there. You don't want to be a freeloader, right? We talked about that last week, a freeloader. And I would liken it to a Christian hitchhiker. You know what the hitchhiker wants to do? Is ride in your car. And he gets in your car, he's not going to help you drive, he's not going to put any gas in the tank, he's not going to give you anything for the upkeep, he's not going to clean it, he's not going to detail it, he's not going to buy you any tires, he's just going to ride. That's all he's there for. He is along for the ride. You pay all the expenses, you do all the work, and he just rides. And if you drop him off before he wants to get dropped off, he'll cuss you when you leave. Amen. And if you have a wreck while he's in the car, he's probably going to sue you, see if he can get some more out of it. That's just the America that we live in, all right? But that's all. He just wants to go along for the free ride. You don't want to be that in the church. So last week we talked about tithing, where giving begins. This morning I want to talk about stewardship, why giving is expected. There's a parable in Matthew 25, begins in verse number 14, down to verse number 30. Read it with me. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, and straightway he took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them other 5 talents. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. But he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth, and hid his Lord's money. And after a long time the Lord of those servants cometh, and reckoneth with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I'll make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of the Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art an hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, there thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury, or with interest. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The story is of a wealthy businessman who is going away on a business trip. He's anticipating that he's going to be gone for some time, and so he chooses 3 servants, and he charges them with the managing of his assets while he is away. After some time has passed, he returns. He calls those 3 servants to him and demands an accounting of how they have managed his resources. In the story, the parable, we find that 2 have been resourceful. They have been good managers, and we find that 1 has been foolish and lazy. If you want to apply the parable of today, this is a capitalist parable. The servants are expected to tend to some kind of liquid assets that are trusted to their care, and they are to earn an increase on what they have been given. The application is that God has entrusted us all with certain assets which we are to manage for His glory. That is the essence of stewardship. Here's how I would define stewardship. I think we can put it on the screen. Stewardship is using God-given abilities to manage God-owned assets to accomplish God-ordained results. A steward is someone who manages somebody else's affairs, somebody else's time, somebody else's finances, or somebody else's property. Now, there's all kinds of areas of stewardship. We could talk about time. We could talk about the talents that God has given us. But the parable is about money. The thing that they are to invest is talents. You understand that talents in this context is not the ability to play the piano or sing, or a talent like we would think of. A talent was a measure of money in Bible economy, much like a dollar is today. So this parable, it is about money, and it is teaching us that the money in my bank account and in your bank account, it is God's money. He has placed it in our hands to invest wisely, and you will be held accountable for how you manage what God has given you. Now, if you ever embrace that philosophy, if you ever let that sink in and seek to live by it, it will absolutely revolutionize your living. It will put your level of living on a whole different plane than what this world understands. Last week we talked about the tithe, and most Christians believe that if they tithe 10% of their income to God, then they have done their duty of stewardship. We have the idea that 10% belongs to God and 90% belongs to me to do whatever I want to as I please. However, tithing is just a small part of stewardship. In fact, tithing is only 10% of stewardship. The idea is not that 10% belongs to God and 90% belongs to you. No, the idea is that 100% belongs to God and you're to manage all 100, the other 90% as well as the 10%. So we find the principles of stewardship in Matthew chapter 25. Now, from this story, I'm going to give you just 5 statements, 5 tenets of stewardship from this story, and then we'll be done. First of all, here's the first statement that I would make, drawing from this parable. Here it is, number 1, God is the owner of everything. God is the owner of everything. In this parable, the servants don't own anything. It is the Lord in this parable that owns all of the talents. Do you get that? God's the owner of everything. Let me give you some verses to support it. Psalm 24, verse number 1. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded upon the seas and established it upon the floods. Psalm 50, verse 11 and 12. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountain, and the wild beasts of the field are mine. I love this, God speaking. If I were hungry, I would not tell thee. For the world is mine and the fullness thereof. Habakkuk 2 and Haggai 2 and verse 8. The silver is mine and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. So get this in your mind, guess or remember, it doesn't matter. Everything in your garage, everything in your home, everything in your barn belongs to God. He created you. So He owns you. He gave you strength to work and the ability to acquire wealth. So He owns that too. You own nothing. God owns everything. Your car, your refrigerator, your boat, your fishing pole, all of it. God owns everything. Now that is a revolutionary thought. It all belongs to God. 1 Chronicles 29 verse 14. David praying, who am I? What is my people? That we should be able to offer so willingly after this sort. For all things come of thee, and of thine own have we given thee. For we're strangers before thee, sojourners, as were all our fathers. Our day on the earth are as a shadow, there's none abiding. O Lord our God, all this store that we have prepared to build in a house for thine holy name cometh of thine hand and is all thine own. I said this last week, that when you give something to God, all you're doing is you are taking something from one hand of God and you're putting it in another hand. You can't give God anything that He hasn't first given you. You say, preacher, I worked for it. But God gave you the strength to work. God gave you the brains, some of you. God gave you the ability. God gives you the energy. God gives you the opportunity. It is His resources that you use to build wealth, so it belongs to God. Here's the first principle. Everything I own, I don't own. God owns it. God owns everything. Every dollar that I earn belongs to Him. Our days are in His hands. Our gifts and our abilities are on loan from Him. And our money is just an advance from heaven. That's all it is. So you have it? God owns everything. Now, as the owner, He has the right to tell me whatever He wants to tell me with my possessions. Right? You have to understand that God as the owner has all the rights. I as the steward, I have nothing but responsibilities. You might read this story and think that this man is unfair by taking from one man and giving to another man. But what you have to understand, he's the owner. He can do what he wants to. He has the rights. I have the responsibility. He's the master. I'm the manager. I am the servant. He is the sovereign. God owns everything. Statement number 2. Not only is God the owner of everything, but statement number 2, we are managers of what God owns. The parable tells us that this man who received 5 talents went and he put the money to work and he gained 5 more talents. Didn't waste any time. I don't know how he did it. I'd love to know how he did it. How did he double the money? I'm guessing in a relatively short amount of time. The guy that had 2 talents, he went, did the same thing, probably invested in the same thing, I suppose, and he doubled his money as well. The third servant, he took a different approach to the whole thing. And the Bible says that he went and he dug a hole in the ground and he hid his Lord's money. That's what it says. Not his money, he hid his Lord's money. Now we're not told exactly what they're supposed to do with this money. The servant, the master doesn't tell them how they are to invest this money, but you are to invest it. You are to make it work for the master. And one guy's a slack off. He's a goof off. He's lazy. He's a bum is what he is. And his mama's going to have to support him for the rest of his life, I'm sure, because he's too lazy and too dumb to invest what his master has given him. Every talent, please understand that every talent belongs to the master, but it has been entrusted to the servant's care. They are to manage the estate. So here is the principle that we gather from this. Everything in my possession belongs to God, and I am to manage it wisely for Him. I am a temporary keeper of whatever He's put in my hand, and He doesn't give it to me just for my enjoyment, just for my pleasure, but I am to do something with it to advance His causes. Some of you live in houses that you own, or the bank owns. Some of you live in houses that you rent. You understand that you can't do everything with a house that you rent that you can do with a house that you own. If you own the house, then you are free to add on or to paint the walls purple or change the carpet or you just do whatever you want to do to that house because you own it. However, if you rent the house, you have probably signed some kind of lease or a contract with the owners of that house and probably have put down a security deposit. That security deposit says that you can't do whatever you want to with that house. If you want to knock out a wall, if you want to change the carpet, if you want to build a porch on the back, you have to get permission from the person that owns that house. You're only leasing it. The security deposit says that if you leave the house and if you have caused damage to the house or they've got to repaint it or whatever, then you don't get your security deposit back. That's the purpose for it. To make sure that you don't mismanage or abuse somebody else's property. So you understand the difference between owning something and renting something. Apply the same principle to your finances. If it is your money, you can do whatever you want to with it. It doesn't matter. Don't have to ask anybody. But if it's not your money, if somebody has just entrusted it to your care, you just holding it for them, then you can't just do whatever you want to with it. And you must see, if you don't ever see your money, your time, your talents, your life as belonging to God, you'll never grasp this concept. You'd be advised to find out what God wants you to do with His money. He would have you to meet your needs, meet the needs of your family, provide for your family, would He not? I think He would have you to save for the future and give to the church and support missions. I think God would have you to do it. Somebody help me out a little bit, all right? All right? He would not have you to buy lottery tickets with His money. I'll just see if I can step in it. I don't think He'd have you buy cigarettes with His money. I know that He wouldn't have you to buy alcohol with His money. I don't think that He would have you to buy extravagant purchases that you don't need with His money. I just think there's a lot of things God don't want me and you to do with His money. You see, spending decisions are spiritual decisions. It is an indicator of your heart. Your checkbook reveals what you really believe about stewardship. You could tell somebody's life story with their checkbook. I would know your goals. I would know your priorities. I would know your convictions. I would know your relationships. I would know the use of your time just from your checkbook. So God is the owner of everything, and you're managers of what God owns. Here's the third statement. We are accountable to God for our stewardship. That's simple, isn't it? I know you wanted something deeper. But you are accountable for your stewardship. There's another parable that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 16. It's the parable of the unjust steward. And here's what it says. He says, there was a certain rich man which had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he wasted his goods. He called him, said unto him, how is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. I think you'll hear that word one day. Give an account of thy stewardship. A day of accounting is coming. Romans 14 and verse 12. So then every one of us shall give an account of himself to God. You are accountable to God for your life, how you have either squandered or used wisely the resources that He has given you. How would you like to show your personal bank account to God and have Him either approve or disapprove of every transaction? And just think about that, huh? How would you like to have to justify in the scheme of eternity every expenditure that we have made just this week? There's one thing that you'll never see if I can help it. You'll never see my checkbook register. Now, I don't have a checkbook register. I have a computer program that keeps all of that stuff. And I'll never show it to you, because it ain't none of your business. And I will never look at yours. That's one of the most private things, isn't it? Huh? There's nobody here that would just open up your checkbook register and let us just all see where you spend all of your money. Ain't nobody going to do that, because that's private, you see. But the thing that we're most secretive about, I tell you that God sees it. God sees it, God knows, and we are accountable to God. There is a judgment day coming, and you and I are going to be there. So here's what you learn. You learn that God is the owner of everything. We are managers of what God's owns, and we are accountable one day for our stewardship. Statement number 4, we have been given more than we think. See, here's the servant's idea. He looks at the man that has 5 talents and says, well, I've only got 1. He looks at the man with 2 talents, I've only got 1. And says, I don't have as many talents as they have, then my stewardship is not as important. If I had as many talents as you did, if I had as much money as you did, then maybe I would be more concerned. But with the 1 talent that I have, with the minimum wage that I make, with the very little that God has given me, because God has not given me much, then stewardship is not as critical to me as somebody that perhaps owns much more than I. I want you to think about something. In Bible economy, they had different measures of money. You know, we have dollars and quarters and what have you. They had the same thing. The smallest measure of money in the Bible was a mite. You've heard of the widow's mite? A widow's mite was the smallest piece of money. A farthing was 2 mites. So you have a mite, smallest piece. A farthing is 2 mites, just hardly nothing. A penny in that day is not a penny like today. A penny, you'll read that in the Bible, a penny was the day's wages for a common laborer. So whatever a common man would make today, in one day, that's what a penny would be worth. And then you had a pound. A pound was 100 pennies. Again, that's not a penny like you think. It's a day's wages. So a pound is worth an average man's wages for 100 days. So you have a mite, you have a farthing, you have a penny, you have a what did I say? A pound, and then you have a talent. A talent was the largest piece of money in Bible days. A talent wasn't just a coin, because a talent was about 75 pounds. It was 15 years' wages. In today's economy, according to that most trusted resource of information, Wikipedia. Only 2 things in the world that's infallible, the Bible and Wikipedia. But I'm kidding. In today's economy, a talent is worth $360,000. So here's what I want to say. This steward has a whole lot more than what he thinks. It's just one talent, but it's worth a whole lot of money. And it reveals the heart of the steward. He doesn't think that the money is worth investing because he doesn't have as much as somebody else has. And so he's lazy. He has a low disregard for his master. He has jealousy of somebody else. Listen, you may only have $5 to your name, but you better spend it wisely. You're not accountable for the $50,000 somebody else has to spend. You are accountable for the $5 that you have to spend. God is keeping a record book of your $5 and their $5,000, and it both is going to be there at the judgment. So don't worry about what somebody else has. Thank God that you don't have to give an accounting for what somebody else has. To whom much is giving, much is required. I met some people this past week who are loaded. Do you know the phrase? They're loaded. But for all of their money, they can't buy any spirituality in their home. It looks like that they're the winners with everything that they've got. It looks like they're winning. But Brother Keith, there's a judgment day coming. Huh? And so the principle is that we've been given more than we think. Principle number 5, I'm done. God rewards faithfulness. The first 2 servants are determined to make a profit. The third is determined just not to take a loss. The first 2 are hard workers and they're willing to take risk, and the third doesn't take any risk. And the first 2 want to advance the master's cause, and the third has no interest in what matters to the master. And the first 2 see money as an opportunity. The third sees it as a problem. The first 2 see it as a blessing, and the third sees it as a burden. Suppose tomorrow morning that you go down to Pensacola to Charles Schwab's office or some local investor, and you decide to invest some loose change that you have. And so you write them a check for $360,000. You talk to some broker, and the reason why they call them broker, because usually you'll end up broker. But you talk to some broker and he says, we ought to diversify this money and certainly we ought to put a big chunk into blue chip stocks and some strong growth funds, mutual funds, and the technology sector. If he tells you that, don't do that right now. But we ought to invest and we ought to diversify and put this money in these efforts. And so he gives you a portfolio, and this is how we're going to invest this $360,000. And we're expecting an annualized return of 12%. All right? Well, that sounds great. That sounds great. So you write the check and you sign the contract, and he's going to invest this money, and you just forget about it. You don't know anything about investing, and he's the expert. He knows how to do this stuff. He does it all the time, and you forget about it. So 5 or 6 years later, Brother West, you decide to go back and check on your money to see how much you've got now. So you go back, you make an appointment, you sit down with that broker in his office, say, hey man, I wrote you a check 5 years ago, $360,000. Just want to see how it's doing, where we at, how we doing. He said, oh man, yeah, about that. He said, it's been busy. 5 years, it's been really busy. In fact, I haven't had time yet to invest your money. In fact, I still have the check in my drawer, still got it here, and said, I just haven't had time. But when I get time, I get some things cleared away, I'm going to one day invest your money. Now in 5 years, you missed out on Starbucks and Krispy Kreme IPO and Home Depot. You missed out on some great stuff right there. 5 years. So I wonder what Brother West is going to do. I know Brother West, being the smart, savvy man that his wife married, I know what he's going to do. He's going to say, give me my money back. I'm not going to let my money just sit in this drawer for 5 years and you haven't invested it. And in fact, my money is worth less now because of inflation and the value of the dollar going down. Give me my money. I'm going somewhere else. Wouldn't you do the same? Sure, you do the same thing. Well, suppose the same scenario. Suppose that you give him $360,000 and he does invest it and he does it wisely. You go back in 5 years and he has doubled it or 50% or whatever, and it's great again. You probably would recommend the broker to me. You'd probably brag. You'd be excited. But I'm telling you that God is no different. He is looking for faithful people who will properly and wisely manage the resources that He has given them. And if you will wisely manage what He has given you, He might give you some more to manage for Him. God rewards faithfulness. In the parable, the servants who are wise managers are rewarded with rule over cities. I know that there is a kingdom application here. I understand that. But the principle behind it is that God requires stewards to be faithful, and God rewards faithfulness. Stewardship. It is why giving is expected. It's because God owns everything. You are just the manager of what He owns. You are accountable for stewardship, and you've been given more than you think, and God will reward you for your faithfulness. That's why giving is expected. Because it's not mine. It belongs to Him, and it's mine to advance His kingdom and His cause. Would you take your Bible, go to Isaiah chapter 44. Isaiah 44, let me show you one passage and then I'm done. Isaiah chapter number 44. Isaiah chapter 44, I want you to look at verse 14. Now here's another parable that the prophet Isaiah is giving. And he says in Isaiah 44 and verse 14, He, in this parable, a man, heweth him down cedars and taketh the cypress and the oak, which he strengtheneth for himself among the trees of the forest. He planteth an ash, and the rain doth nourish it. Then shall it be for a man to burn, for he will take thereof and warm himself. Yea, he kindleth it, and baketh bread. Yea, he maketh a god, and worshipeth it. He maketh it a graven image, and falleth down thereto. He burneth part thereof in the fire, with part thereof he eateth flesh. He roasteth roast, and is satisfied. Yea, he warmeth himself, and saith, Aha, I am warm, I have seen the fire. And the residue thereof he maketh a god. Even his graven image he falleth down unto it, and worshipeth it, and prayeth unto it, and saith, Deliver me, for thou art my God. Now the main message of the parable is the folly of idolatry. The prophet is saying how futile to make an idol and then to bow down to that idol and expect it to deliver you in times of trouble. But there is another principle that is embedded in the text, another lesson, and it is this. Isaiah describes a man who cuts down a tree, he takes the wood, and he uses the wood for himself. He builds him something. He builds a fire. He cooks a meal, and he warms himself with a fire. So with the wood, he does something for himself. He uses the best part of the wood, the best part of the trees, for his personal needs. But verse number 17 demands our attention. With the residue thereof, the rest, whatever's left over, the scraps, the part that he can't do anything else with that part he maketh a god, even his graven image. He uses the best part of the wood for his personal needs, and he uses the scraps to build a god with. He uses the best for himself and the throwaways for his religion. Here is a man who gives his God second best. He puts himself before his God and relegates spiritual matters to second place. Does that sound familiar? I wonder if you and I have ever been guilty of doing the same thing. I wonder if you and I have ever been guilty of giving God the leftovers. How are you doing in the stewardship of life? We could talk about time, we could talk about talents, we could talk about a lot of different areas. But with the life that God has given you, how are you doing in managing it for Him? Would you bow your heads with me this morning? Our heads bowed, eyes closed. Every head's bowed, eyes closed. Piano player, you come. Begin to play for us very softly. So much of our time is wasted on trivial pursuits. So much money wasted on foolish things. So much of life spent on things that have absolutely no eternal value.